guys, it's TheFrXion here, or Tank12, having to call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where we are today revisiting the E-25. Yes, you've heard correct, the E-25. Probably one of the worst vehicles in terms of balance that have ever reached the World of Tanks game. This tank, when it was released, was so bad, it was so asphyxiating the tier 7, tier 5, tier 6 experience that Wargaming vowed to never sell it again. It turns out, a couple of years later, Wargaming sold it over and over again, and it's more than just a handful. So, handful of times, yeah. Why is the E-25 this kind of vehicle that everyone looks at and just thinks it's massively overpowered? Well, because it's one of the few tanks in World of Tanks that still have the tank destroyer camouflage bonus. That is, when you fire outside of or inside of a bush, you do not lose camouflage with the E-25, or you do not lose as much camouflage as you would lose if you do the same with another tank destroyer. There's only one other tank destroyer that still has the old mechanic that the E-25 uses, and it's the SU-122-44. Also a tier 7 premium tank destroyer, but I wouldn't say it's on par with the E-25. I'd still say it's a pretty powerful vehicle, especially since it has the 122mm gun, you know, the good old D-25S that basically every other Soviet tank has. Or is it? It's a very similar gun. It's the exact same penetration, all that kind of, you know, stuff. But the E-25 has been pretty much deemed to be one of the most overpowered vehicles for a very long time. And the question is, does it still hold that title? Is this vehicle still as good as it used to be back then? Well, to be fair, I don't really see a reason why it shouldn't be. It still has basically all the exact same values. You still play it the exact same way. But we know that now in Tier 8, we have a lot more vehicles that you are going to be facing when you're playing the E-25 that have more armor, that have way, way bigger guns. And we know that the meta has changed quite drastically. So the question is, does the E-25 still perform as well as it once did prior, when the game was a bit slower, when, you know, the enemy tanks didn't have as good of spotting equipment as they have nowadays? I think, generally speaking, personally, I think the vehicle will still do pretty well, but I do think that the E-25 might have lost some of its spite. But we're going to be playing some games, probably 2 games that I'm going to be showing you guys, and we're going to see just how well the E-25 has held up, and if it's still considered a very powerful, maybe overpowered vehicle in the year 2023. So let's jump on over to gameplays. So once again, I have 2 gameplays ready for you guys. One is on Live Oaks, and it's a very defensive kind of game, perfect for the E-25. And the other one is on the Czech map, Pilsen. And both of them, I'm actually not the highest tier, but most of the games, I'm actually in the middle of the tier. I think in both of the other, like in this game and the other one, I'm in the middle of the park. Right here you can see we have very dangerous targets. The BZ-176, he's going to be a contestant in this match. Don't worry, we're going to be taking care of him afterwards. And yeah, the E-25 is a tank that you do not take too aggressively to the enemy, at least at the beginning of the match, especially when you're lower tier. Now keep in mind, this vehicle does not have a lot of ammo. It actually does have 60 rounds, but they do melt very quickly once you do engage a target, because a lot of these rounds will either miss the target or they're just going to be straight up bouncing off the vehicles that you're trying to shoot. So you need to have some patience, you need to know which targets you can penetrate, and you need to know when to save your shots. APCR is also very commonly used on the E-25, and it's very, very expensive to run. So keep that in mind. This is a vehicle that usually does not generate credits. It eats them up like no other tank does like it. Except for maybe the FV215 B183 or the FV004005, because both of these tanks are really, really bad at using premium HESH because they are expensive as hell. So you can see we have a little bit of a problem in this match. We are only 4 or 5 tanks trying to hold off the entire enemy team that is advancing through the town. No, not the entire enemy team, but quite a few dangerous of them. Few dangerous ones of them. And on the other side, we have our entire tier 8 armada trying to push the tracks. And sometimes that might work, sometimes it will not work. But if we lose the tracks and we lose the base, this is pretty much GG. At this moment in time, the enemy team does have quite the advantage with engaging or with pushing our base. The thing is just that the E-25 is incredibly well hidden. It's a tank that has very, very good camo rating. That means that even if you are looking through a bush and it's transparent, you're going to be able to rain hell on your enemies. And that hasn't changed in like 8 or 9 years since this tank has come out. And you can see how destructive this little 75mm gun can be if we just have a tank that we can actually penetrate from the side. And that's the BZ-176, because he was so hyper-focused on killing this tiger, who, by the way, was not falling back, because it's probably quite difficult to fall back in a tiger, that he moved himself all the way over to the left and got absolutely farmed by me, the E-25. And right now, we have a very awkward kind of scenario where we have to fight a 112 in an E-25. And this is where you can see just how useless this 75mm gun is if you're unable to penetrate your targets. Because it's basically a BB gun that fires at somebody and just doesn't really do anything. It doesn't even have enough damage to track certain vehicles. So that's why you probably have to load APCR, or when you're even loading the APCR round, you still have to go around the vehicle or to the side of it. You can see that our team has done a magnificent job at clearing out everyone on the tracks, and now it's basically for us just time for cleanup. So we're just waiting for the 112 to pop up again, and we're just trying to get as good side shot. But sadly, since the 112 has very, very thick side armor and the tracks do not help with our with our ability to go through, we're just trying to track him, but we are unable to do so. But like, even at, I'm not sure, like 130 meters, he wasn't able to spot us, but we weren't very transparent. So we had double bushes right there, so he was never going to be able to spot us unless he moved a lot closer to us. But it just shows you how quickly we went through all of our standard ammunition and how little damage we actually did. 1,491. It's not bad per se. I don't want to say it's not good damage for the E-25, especially in a tier 8 game. But at the same time, it is a bit sad if you consider that we fired so many rounds and we only did 1,400 damage. But all is forgiven, because in the end, we managed to get the LTG. We ram kill him, and, well, we don't actually ram kill him, but we do the damage, at least like almost 250 HP worth of damage, and at the same time we finish him off with the final round. But you can see that ammo on this vehicle is extremely scarce, and I think nothing has really changed ever since it has been released, so it still feels very much like the old E-25 back in the days. So let's take a look at what this tank can actually do when it's fighting vehicles at its own battle rating or at its own tier, and just how good this vehicle can be when it is able to fire at tanks that are quite a few meters away. Okay, we have the second game on El Halluf, and it's probably the perfect match for the E-25. Some tier 7 vehicles, majority of them are actually tier 6 tanks, and it's a very big and open map where whenever we have a good sniping position, we can probably do some damage. This is where I like to first check the fishbowl, which is basically this valley down here, and where I'd like to take some pop shots at anything that comes in here. And with the E-25, with the mobility that you have with this vehicle, that's like no problem. I also like to run binoculars, and that gives me quite a boost at view range. And usually it's quite a nice setup to run with this vehicle. We spot the T50-2, and he is a very aggressive T50-2 player. Probably a player who is still back in time, like when we first played the T50-2, and just how quickly we punish him is pretty insane. He loses 409 HP to us and another 50 HP to incoming fire by somebody else, and we have the next target. It's a Type 58. But even we are not able to fire at him again in those 2 seconds because he has already moved into cover. And that's why this tank is so incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly good with its gun handling. It has such a high rate of fire, and it's just able to maneuver and hide itself very, very well. And that hasn't changed. Even though there are more tier 8 vehicles now that are very broken in terms of armor, I still think that the E-25 is probably still one of the worst vehicles in terms of balancing out there. It's such a broken vehicle, and basically it hasn't changed much. I've noticed that the SC-122-44, which I'm going to be making a video of very soon, and the E-25, they both haven't really lost any of their charm, but they are less combat effective when they go into tier 8 matches, not just because it's a tier 7 going up against tier 8s, but also because tier 8 has changed a lot in the recent few years. And I think that has made these vehicles less effective, because they're still very good. They still have a very high rate of fire, they're very well hidden, but they just do not have the penetration most of the time to deal with tanks that are very heavily armored. Tier 7 tanks most of the time, well, they're not very heavily armored. We can easily take care of them. The only thing you have to be cautious of is when you get spotted. That Yak Panther there puts a very big shell into us, taking about 1/3 of our HP with that one big shot. So you want to be really cautious when you're trying to push here, because you can see everyone is going to be opening fire when you're trying to push down this little ridgeline. The next target on our list is a Super Hellcat, and you can just see how quickly we eat up this American counterpart. And yeah, he lost about a good 600 HP there in a few seconds. And sadly, because we cannot spot him anymore, he managed to actually get away. Probably used his repair kit, something like that. Now, even at distance, this vehicle is still fairly competitive. Look at this. Look at us shooting the Super Hellcat and being able to just deal damage on a constant basis. That's what you love to see when you play the E-25, but it's certainly not a very fair experience for anyone that has to go up against this vehicle at tier 7 or tier 6. You are pretty exposed though when you get spotted, and since you're so small and you have the mobility, it's going to be quite easy to run away from targets. But at the same time, when people do spot you, they usually will focus fire on the E-25, especially on a tier 7, tier 6 match, because it's kind of a game decisive tank. It can really win games or lose games depending on how you play it, or how well or how bad you play it. So this is like the real, like the place you want to be in when you're playing a E-25. We have a Panther, we have a Super Chaffee, both of them far enough away from us that we cannot get spotted by them, and at the same time far enough away from us that we have their rears to us that we can just easily shoot them over and over and over and over again. Right here, we're just going to be farming this Panther. We set him on fire once, we set the Type 58 on fire, we set him on fire again, And right here, we just eat up this Panther, take away his 900 HP in a very quick and decisive way. And now we're at 2,626 damage, and we're going to roll up on the artillery pieces because, you know, why the hell not? We can just easily take care of these guys. And that's the beauty of the E-25. This vehicle is insanely strong. There's a very good reason why Tier 7 was a very difficult place to play after this vehicle was released. And even today, in the hands of a capable player, it's still a very dangerous vehicle. I just have the feeling that times have changed a little bit, that Tier 8 has become such a, you know, big cornerstone. Most of the matches you play as a Tier 7 is against Tier 8 vehicles, sadly. And that means that you are going to be facing a lot more powerful opponents that will not allow you to do what I was able to do in this game. Doing 3,000 damage at Tier 7 is quite easy, but doing the same amount of damage at Tier 8 with the E-25 is pretty damn hard. But you can always also play it as a little bit of a, you know, scout, because it's very fast, it's very small, it has great camouflage values, and with binoculars, it can actually scout pretty damn well. So, you know, it's a pretty good choice for players, and that's why it always sells so well. So that was my revisited for the E-25. It's still a very powerful vehicle, a vehicle that is very capable at Tier 7. Even at Tier 8 can still be a very big threat. Doesn't meet a lot of Tier 9s, but when it goes into Tier 9 matches, that's where you are really going to be struggling. But having all of these tools available is going to make your life a lot easier, even at Tier 9, when you're able to use the very good camo values and the mechanic where you do not really get lit up when you fire out of a bush. So basically, that rounds this up. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.